Freeman versus Ferris, a small claims case. Small claims means we are trying to do this without any attorneys being involved. Nobody is represented by a lawyer. You're also asking for this to be resolved here in front of me, as opposed to something like having a jury trial. It'll just be me deciding it today. So if both parties are ready and able to proceed, the first thing I would do is swear you both in. So go ahead and raise your right hands. You swear or affirm testimony you give here today would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
I do.
All right. So I did get some information about this ahead of time. So essentially, Ms. Freeman rented out a dumpster trailer to the business there, the Farm Deli, with understanding that that was going to be $100 for every week that it was used. What I didn't see, Ms. Freeman, who'd you actually make that deal with?
John Blue was, I believe, her general contractor.
Okay.
I didn't really make a deal with anybody, I guess, but John was the person I spoke with. But the problem is that John won't pay me. So, and he directed me to Christine Ferris for payment, as you can see by a text and an email there.
And then when you did get it back, let's see here, what was that? Maybe 10 months later or so, there was some damages to it. 2 tires needed to be replaced, a hydraulic pump replaced. That $997, you actually paid that, or that's just the estimate you got to get it fixed?
No, sir, I had to, it's a working piece of equipment for my business. I needed it fixed. I paid for it.
And the out of commission for 6 weeks, you did not actually ask for any of that. The 5195, that's just the 10 weeks or 42 weeks of $100 a week plus the $997, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So Ms. Ferris, I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain to me why it is you don't think that you would owe this money.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I'm just a little nervous. I've never done this.
First of all, let me tell you, this was a phenomenal price. For you to have had a dumpster where 10 loads are going out would have cost you just thousands and thousands more dollars than $100 a week. This was a sweet deal. That's why I'm a little confused why you aren't just sort of happy to pay it and be done.
Absolutely, and I understand that. So the original agreement was made between her and Johnny Blue, my contractor, and he borrowed it in December when they had some projects going on together. So I assumed that she was being kind to him. I had nothing to do with this. I had actually bid out getting construction dumpsters. So I do understand the price of them. And we used it for a few weeks. We hadn't even gotten our building license yet. So he did a little bit of demo with it, and then it sat parked for several months. And I said, doesn't Lisa want this back? And he said, well, the agreement was $100 a load. And I didn't double check with Lisa because the deal was between the two of them, and he's my contractor. So I'm not double checking everything.
Let me just, and I just want to intervene for a second here. All of that may be true. But the way that we would remedy that is then you would turn into a plaintiff and this gentleman would turn into the defendant, where you would be saying, hey, you're acting on my behalf as my general contractor. You're making deals that I am either not aware of or not agreeing to. But at the end of the day, the actual service provider, the person whose dumpster that was or who does that service, gets paid. Now, whether that should come from you or him, that could very well turn into a small claims where you sue him. But the first things first, as the business owner who engaged a general contractor, the buck would stop with you in terms of Ms. Freeman getting paid. And then I understand if what you're saying is, hey man, I did not think that was what was going to happen. I got, sort of led astray by my general contractor. Then you may turn around and be the one who sues him. And I wish we had that sort of middle party here, but we don't.
Yeah,
But Ms. Freeman doesn't need to sue him. She can sue you as the person he's acting as the agent for. Does that make sense?
yes, it does.
Okay.
Um, when the invoice was sent to me, I shared it with Johnny and he said, this is absolutely not what we agreed upon. Um, write me a check for the original amount and I will work out the details with Lisa. I'm the one that was dealing with her. I will take care of it. So I wrote him a check for the total amount that we originally agreed upon, and I added $300 to it for damage to tires.
So how much was the check that you wrote? How many loads did you think you were paying for?
For 10 loads. And
All right.
so it
So
was a
you wrote a
check.
check for $1,000 and then 300 more to throw towards the damage.
Absolutely.
All right. So we're not on totally different pages here. We're just in disagreement about what the actual dollar, whether it was per load or per week. But here's the situation, Ms. Freeman. This is just something you own and you do it as a side thing, or this is your method of making money.
It's a method of making money. I own a property management company. The trailer was brand new when
What is the going rate that you rent it out for?
$100 a week, which to your point, Your Honor, a trailer like that in Holland rents for $100 for 4 hours. It's $140.
So my question is, do you ever do it by load? See, by load doesn't make a lot of sense to me because load might be wear and tear on the trailer, but really what Ms. Freeman is, it's by time. You know what I mean? If the next person wants to give her the same amount of money for the next week, so whether you take 1 load or 10 loads in that week would just be how efficiently you're using the $100. To pay by the load doesn't make nearly as much sense as to pay by the time that you have the dumpster where she's not renting it out to other people. That's why I'm not saying that isn't your understanding, Ms. Ferris. We'll give you that. That's your understanding. I'm just saying that doesn't make a lot of sense from your general contractor to think that he's paying by the load. In other words, if I take 2 loads in one day, and if I take 2 loads in a year, I owe the same amount of money? That doesn't make sense, right?
No.
It makes sense that you'd owe a lot more money holding it at your house for a whole year, even if you only took it to the dump one time, than if you only used it for 2 days but took it 5 loads. You see what I mean? It doesn't really make sense to go by load. It makes a lot more sense to go by time on the clock where I can't rent this out to somebody else. The load would be wear and tear. I could see how you may have a sort of a supplement to that, that if it was over a certain amount of loads or something, then you may add something for that. But time makes a lot more sense than loads. Do you get where I'm coming from with that?
I do agree with you on that. And to that point, I would say that I thought it was a verbal agreement between 2 friends because Johnny Blue and Lisa Freeman have a long history of doing projects together. And Johnny was actually working on projects for her at that time and flying down to Florida regularly, working on her hurricane damaged home and driving up north to her vacation home and working and taking breaks from my project to help her out. So my assumption, which in retrospect was probably not smart, we should have gotten it in writing, was that they had a verbal agreement as friends that, hey, you're not using this trailer right now, so I can use it and get some money back to you. And there were periods of months where the trailer was not in use and it was sitting on my property. And I said, Johnny, should we get this back to her? And he said, no, it's the dead of winter. She's just gonna have to be plowing around it in her parking lot. So don't worry about it. And they talked and worked regularly, so I stayed out of it completely.
And to tell you the truth, I don't really even blame you for not taking action above and beyond what you've just explained. That's why I said that at the end of the day, this may very well turn into, after today, you become a plaintiff. But here's why I would sort of disagree with how you're viewing the case. First of all, Ms. Freeman, let me be clear. $100 a week, was that the friend price, or that's what you charge me to rent this?
No, that was, and actually, Your Honor, you need to understand, I'm sure Saugatuck was a small community.
Uh-huh.
I was also a friend with Chris Ferris and was a frequent person in her business in the
Yeah.
deli. And so it was, I guess, just a gesture of good faith to both John and Christine that I give them a good deal like that. I would never have said $100 a load. That is ludicrous. I would have never known how many loads John Blue pulled to the dump. Plus, he
Yeah.
way overweighted it. He put way too much weight in it. And that's how it correspondingly ended up
That's why
being
the
broken.
hydraulic pump needed to be
Yes.
replaced, I'm assuming. All right. So the other thing is that, lots of times when there's this sort of disagreement like this, and I'm explaining sort of how things work, even if it wasn't you two in this particular scenario, where one person is the service provider who has a business doing this, and the other person is the person who's just paying money for the service, and you don't get it in writing, I will usually always spank that person, Miss Freeman, and it will be well, here's your tough lesson about getting things in writing, even when you're dealing with friends, because it's business. And lots of times, what I would do in this scenario is limit. I would always say that you're going to end up with more than $1,300. All right, but I may not give you 5,195 because your flaw in all this was to not get it in writing. But the reason why I'm not necessarily going to do that here is, at the end of the day, for the amount of time that the dumpster was used and how the dumpster was used, this price is still just a really good price. And so I don't really feel the need to also cut into that. If anything, I think Ms. Freeman lost money on this, where I don't know, how many of these do you have?
Just one. And I literally.
And do you have, I know it was brand new for you,
Yes.
but do you have any idea how often it is this is going to see? I mean, what was the timetables here? Was this like December of last year to like October of, I mean,
The year
in
before.
other words, how long have you had it back after it got fixed?
Well,
From then till now?
about a year. About a year.
All right. How many times have you essentially rented it out and with a person and made money?
I'm not renting it really anymore. I'm just using it for my own property. I lost that trailer for an entire summer, and I'm a property manager in Saugatuck. That was a big loss for me, for my business. I had to rent other ways to move things because I didn't have my trailer. So I have not done that again. I knew Christine, no John, never thought that this would ever turn into this kind of a situation. I did it as a goodwill gesture. So I use the trailer for myself.
Essentially, what I do want to explain also, Ms. Ferris, is I understand that you even said to yourself, oh, okay, well, I got to tack some on there because, it got flat tire, there was damage to it. Did you actually see the invoice, the $997 invoice? I know that was sent to court. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see it.
So I got a letter, an email so Johnny Blue told me not to respond to Lisa because he was taking care of it. And he said if I said anything to her that it would inflame her. And in retrospect, I see that not responding to her inflamed her, and I should not have listened to Johnny. So I did make a mistake there. But Johnny told me he would handle it. And when I gave him a check, he cashed it, and he told me that he would get it to her, which never happened. And then
so Ms. Freeman, you never even got this $1,300?
Oh, no, I have, Your Honor, I've not gotten a penny. Not a penny.
All right. So, ladies, I'm starting to see what the problem here is. The problem is a third party that's not sitting in front of me, because that probably would have gone a long way to, if it was promptly delivered and say, oh, this is a big misunderstanding, here's what we did. You guys probably could have come to some third position that, everybody was slightly unhappy with, but everybody could live with. I see why Miss Freeman is saying, I guess I got to go to small claims. I'm just getting totally bamboozled here. And Miss Ferris is like, I thought this was an issue, a non-issue, and then a little issue that I took care of. And then it turns out I'm sitting here in court getting sued for $5,000. So the reality is I want you to sort of understand, when the dust settles here, that I would make this decision for what I would say is fair to do here, 42 weeks at $100 a week, plus the $997 that it actually took to get the trailer back to the shape it was in before it was rented out. But Ms. Ferris, I'm not giving you legal advice, but you owe money to Ms. Freeman after today that really you could turn around and retrieve a good portion of that from this contractor, because that, first of all, if anyone between, Ms. Ferris or what's his name again? I'm sorry.
Johnny Blue.
Would have understood that this price per load doesn't make a lot of sense versus a per week. That's how everybody rents out trailers, is time, not necessarily loads. Because what Ms. Freeman is also mentioning is something that comes up with loads all the time. The trailers, it's rated for 5,000 pounds. You take it to the dump, you put 7,000 in it. Like, they fine you for that. They charge you extra for that because load is a separate thing than time, but it's usually always time. And the fact that you're testifying to me that, hey, I wrote a check to try to address this issue. And then you're hearing now that it never went to Ms. Freeman. That's a problem, but that's not a problem with you. That's a problem with this gentleman. So we need to get to the bottom of that.
There were months where the trailer was sitting empty, and if Lisa had, Miss Freeman had ever asked for it back, I'm
But
really
here's the
sorry.
thing though, Ms. Ferris, she
Yeah.
doesn't know whether or not you guys are just continuously using the trailer, every couple of days to renovate whatever you're renovating. That's not really her to say, hey, are you done with it? It's more you to say, hey, now we're done with it, right?
It's my mistake assuming that my contractor was managing the equipment he rented. Well, he was also working for her. They were in constant communication. Johnny even showed me communication from Lisa on his phone, like, hey, can I get the trailer back? And Johnny said, yes, it's full. I'll empty it and bring it to you in the morning. Johnny showed me that a year and a half ago when this was happening. And he said, that's the only time Lisa ever asked for it back. And I can't prove that because Johnny's not here.
But even between your general contractor and Miss Freeman, it would be more for general contractor to say, okay, we're done with it. Or now the other thing too is maybe you don't wait till a whole year goes by and then say, okay, well, not quite a year, but 42 weeks. You could say, oh, okay, how about I bill you for 20 weeks because it's been a minute. Those are also sort of, business decisions. I'm sure if you were strangers, Miss Freeman would have rode this a little tighter. I think she probably, was a little more loose with this because, of course, it was, everybody knew each other. It's a small town, and it's not like it was a ton of money, $100 a week for business owners. But anyway, what we need here is someone to come in, make this decision. I am going to decide this was 5,100. It's actually, I think, 97. You asked for 95, but I got to do it by what you're asking for because that's what Miss Ferris was on notice for.
Yes.
5,195 in damages. The only other expense, Miss Ferris, just so you understand, Miss Freeman had to pay certain monies out of pocket to get here today. She had to pay a filing fee with court. She had to pay to have you served. That $82, she's also able to collect that. So I just wanted you to understand where that other $82 comes from. And then, like I said, I don't know how many times I could say this, but this doesn't have to be the end of this. What I've decided now, you both would have a chance to appeal where either one of you could say, I don't agree with what just happened there. I want to go to general civil with this in front of the district court judges. To do that, you must ask for that within 7 days of today's date. And you must ask for that in writing. So do you understand your rights on appeal?
Yes.
Yes.
And just because this decision went against you, Ms. Ferris, does not mean that you could in turn rope in a third party and sort of, straighten it out a different way where you're the plaintiff and not the defendant. But just so, we understood that, we're all right, Mr. Grable, you want to take yourself off mute so that I'd be able to hear your responses? There we go. This is file 2501136 SC, Freeman versus Grable, a small claims case. Small claims means that we're here trying to do this without involving attorneys, so nobody is represented by a lawyer. We're also asking for this to be resolved here in front of me, as opposed to either party asking for a jury trial or anything like that. So first things first, if the parties are ready, willing, and able to proceed here in front of me, I would swear you in. Please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm any testimony you give here today would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
I do.
All right. So first things first, you guys don't know each other, right?
No.
Miss Freeman, who is it you were trying to send the Zelle to?
Well, interestingly, Mr. Grable lives in Stevensville, and the gentleman that I was trying to send the money to, just with a pure amount of irony, I think, also is in Stevensville. He owns a company called Dixon Motor Works, and his name is Scott Dixon, and his number is one digit off from Daniel Grable's phone number, to which I Zelled the money.
Okay. So here's the thing, is my understanding of the information I have at this point. $1,500 Zelle went to, Mr. Grable was not supposed to go to Mr. Grable. At some point in time, you realized that, Miss Freeman, and then you got real lucky, because you understand if Mr. Grable was in Arizona or something like that, this probably wouldn't even be enforceable. It is enforceable in small claims because you're both here in Michigan. Mr. Grable, so like I said, you don't know Miss Freeman, right?
Correct.
And then so money shows up in your Zelle. What did you think it was for?
So funny enough that you just said that. So the week before that the transaction showed up in my account, I had actually just moved to Arizona for the winter.
Oh, yeah, I completely picked a state. I'm not trying to imply I somehow know something about you. I could have mentioned any of the other 49 states, but
that was random. But so I just signed a lease for the winter, and to pay my landlord, I was supposed to Zelle him. And this was my first time using Zelle as well. So the week before this happened, I just signed up through my bank, sent money to my landlord, and even I was kind of like, oh, that was a little too easy just to send money to a number. And so then a week later, this shows up, and I was just kind of like, whoa, like, is this like fraud? Like, what happened here? And so I saw the money in my account. I was talking to my family who was back in Michigan, called my bank. They said, yeah, we've heard of stuff like this kind of happened before. They kind of told me to be alarmed of fraudulent action. And so
you should.
Yeah. So they said it was on me if I wanted to reach back out to Miss Freeman or if I wanted to just let it go for that moment. And so I chose to ignore the matter. And then she reached out a couple months later and I ignored it again. And now we are here.
Okay. So just a couple of things. Yeah, that's a real dumb way that Zelle does it. I don't know if you're familiar with any of the other systems. Either of you do Venmo?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Because Venmo, there's some name that somebody picks, right? But to make sure that's the right person, the next question they ask you is, and what's the last four of their phone number? So that this cross-wired thing doesn't happen. But for somebody to, type in a number and then they just fat finger one digit, I mean, can happen. But Mr. Grable and Ms. Freeman, I want to maybe take a little longer to explain my logic here so that we're not sort of thinking there's anything nefarious going on in Mr. Grable's end. There are a lot of what they call little phishing schemes where someone will essentially, it looks like they sent you money. And they do something where they want you to pay it back. And then before it actually clears their bank that their money is actually taken out the first time, you've already sent them money back. So Mr. Grable, I think it's actually the smart play to sort of just pause and see where this goes. But I think that now sort of, a little bit down the rabbit hole here, what we're seeing is, yes, it was just a mistake that you got Zelled this $1,500. And now I'm assuming you're still sitting on the $1,500.
Correct. Yeah, I've not touched the money. It's still in the same.
And my job in small claims is to do what's right and fair. And what would be right or fair is to order that you would pay a money judgment of $1,500 to Miss Freeman. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
All right. So here's the only other thing I'm going to do on this. that is a little unusual, but I think is even the more fair thing to do, right? Normally, when I make a decision, it would be for damages. That's the 1,500, but also costs. In other words, Miss Freeman, out of her pocket, had to pay money to file this case against you and to serve you. She paid $62 to do that. Now, normally she's able to recover that. It would be $1,562 that you would have to pay to her. Everybody's on board with that, right? But here, I think Mr. Grable is just making what I would call, cautious decisions. I don't necessarily want to make him pay more than the 1,500. And Miss Freeman, I think if you're getting your 1,500 back, $62 is a completely fair amount for you to have, fat fingered one digit off. All right.
Agreed.
So I'm not going to order costs in this case. I'm just going to order the flat 1,500 that you would pay to Miss Freeman. And then as soon as you do that, this judgment will be satisfied and over. I do still need to inform you that you do have the right to appeal either party. If you think that my decision is not right, you can appeal this within 7 days to the district court, but you must do that in writing. And then after 7 days, your option to do that is done and my order would stand. Everyone understand their rights on appeal?
Understood.
Yes.
All right, then I'm going to go ahead and release parties. You'll both get a notice in the mail. You don't have to wait for that. You can wait for that. We do expect that the parties would take care of this themselves, i.e. get in touch with each other and, send the money, maybe over Zelle, maybe not, or maybe some other way, whatever you decide. All right.
Fair enough.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Freeman, that's what we call a good day in court.
Yeah, I feel a lot better.